Have you ever sat in a classroom and just wondered, who decided this is what I need to learn and why? It's a question we've all had, right? We usually think, oh, it's the teacher or maybe a textbook company. But the real story is so much bigger, so much more interesting. There's this massive hidden architecture behind it all, a system that doesn't just decide what we learn, but why we learn it. So let's pull back the curtain and explore the blueprint of education.
So here's the game plan. First, we're going to nail down what a curriculum actually is. Then, we'll get into the big ideas, the philosophy that forms its foundation. After that, we'll see how the actual learning plan gets designed, step by step. We'll look at how they check the results to make sure it's working. And finally, we'll tackle the huge disruption the digital world is causing for the whole system. All right, first things first. Let's start with the most fundamental question of all. What exactly is a curriculum? That whole decision-making process, it's so much more than just a single teacher with a book. It's this giant interconnected web of experts, designers, and thinkers, all working inside a pretty structured framework. It's really a process of building, of planning, of designing, kind of like how an architect designs a skyscraper. So, at its core, the definition that I think really nails it comes from a theorist named Hilda Taba. She said a curriculum is simply a plan for learning. That's it. It's not just a list of subjects, it's the entire plan. It's the big picture goals, the specific stuff you'll learn, the experiences you'll have to get you there, and, how we check if you actually got it. It is the master blueprint.
And this brings us to a really, really critical distinction. You have to separate the curriculum, which is the what, the plan, the program, from instruction, which is the how, the actual teaching part. That's the pedagogy, the methods, how it's delivered in the classroom. Think about it this way. If the curriculum is the architect's blueprint, instruction is the construction crew actually on site building the house. You need both, they depend on each other, but they are not the same thing. So if the curriculum is the blueprint, what's its foundation? I mean, before anyone designs a single lesson, you have to answer a much bigger question. What is the whole point of education anyway? This is the philosophical bedrock. Is the goal just to pass down essential facts from one generation to the next? Or is it about nurturing each kid's individual talents and curiosities? Your answer to that question changes literally everything that comes after. For well over a century, two major philosophies have basically been in a tug-of-war for the soul of education. On one side, you've got essentialism. This says there's a core body of knowledge, math, science, history, that every single educated person needs to have. It's about cultural transmission. But on the other side, you've got progressivism, championed by people like John Dewey. This view says, no, we need to focus on the whole child, their interests, their needs, learning by doing, by solving real-world problems. This quote really gets to the heart of that traditional essentialist view that John Dewey was fighting so hard against. It's this idea of the student as an empty bucket, just a passive vessel waiting to be filled up with knowledge. So this choice, is the student a bucket or an explorer, is the first and maybe the most important decision in building any curriculum. Okay, so you've got your philosophy sorted out. Now it's time to get practical. How do you actually design this plan?
Well, it's not random. It's a very structured, repeating cycle. You start with your big aims, your philosophy. Then you look at what students and society actually need to figure out what content to pick. From there, you design the learning experiences. And then, this is crucial, you evaluate how well the whole thing worked, and that feedback goes right back into making the plan better next time. As designers put this all together, they're following some key principles, almost like an architect would. Scope is the big map, everything that's going to be covered. Sequence is the route you take. You learn addition before you tackle algebra. Balance is making sure everything gets the right amount of attention. And integration is about connecting the dots, so what you're learning in history connects to the book you're reading in English class.
So where does the actual content, the stuff you've learned, come from? It's a mixture of inputs. Planners look at the needs of students. What skills do they need to succeed? They look at the needs of society. What kind of citizens are we trying to create? They think about the local community. And of course, they look at the subject itself. I mean, you can't teach biology without talking about cells, right? A plan is only as good as its results, so a huge piece of this whole system is evaluation. But this is where a really common mistake gets made. And here's the absolute key. When we talk about evaluation in this context, we're not just talking about giving kids a grade. We are talking about putting the entire educational plan on trial. Did it actually work? Were our goals the right ones? Did we have the right resources? Did we achieve what we set out to do?
Now, professionals use established models to do this, like the CIPP model. It just breaks the evaluation down into layers. Context asks, are we even trying to achieve the right things? Input checks if we have the resources, the money, the materials, the trained teachers to pull it off. And process watches the implementation. Is the plan actually being followed in the classroom like it's supposed to be? The results from all this checking aren't the end of the road. No way. They create a feedback loop that flows right back to the beginning of that cycle, which drives constant improvement. The goal is to have a system that is always learning about itself, always adapting, and always getting better. Which brings us to the single biggest challenge this system faces today. For centuries, this cycle of development moved at a pretty calm, predictable pace. But now, it's facing a massive disruption. I mean, just look at the difference. The 20th century classroom was teacher-centered. It was about memorizing facts. You were a passive consumer of information from one source, the textbook. The 21st century classroom is totally different. It's student-centered. It's about critical thinking, problem-solving. It's about collaborating and creating, using tons of different digital sources. This shift demands a total rethink of the curriculum. And this really shows you the challenge. New technologies are coming at us constantly. If you look at something like the Gartner hype cycle for education, you can see the wild ride. Some tech, like VR, is just getting started. Other things, like learning analytics, are at the peak of inflated hype. And some, like gamification, are in that trough of disillusionment, where the early excitement has worn off. The real challenge for designers is figuring out what's a fad and what's a truly transformative tool. And here it is. Here is the heart of the problem. That number, 15. That's the number of years it can take for our education systems to fully adapt to and integrate a new technology. 15 years. In a world where your phone is obsolete in 3, you can see how we're at risk of being in a constant state of catch-up. This new reality means the very definition of being literate is changing. It's not just about reading and writing anymore. Organizations like the National Council of Teachers of English point out that it now includes a whole new suite of skills. Being able to manage a flood of online information, collaborate with people on the other side of the planet, create your own content, and understand the ethics of being a good digital citizen. These new literacies have to be built into the curriculum. So what's the big takeaway from all this? A curriculum isn't just some dusty old book on a shelf. It's a living, breathing system. It's dynamic, it's driven by people, and it reflects our deepest beliefs about what it means to be an educated person. And it's always in this vital cycle of design, of trying things, and of trying to improve. And that leaves us with the big, unanswered question for the future. The architecture of education was built for a much slower, more predictable time. As the world changes faster and faster, the ultimate challenge is this: how can the very system that designs our learning evolve fast enough to keep up?